Tomorrow is the big primary election, and in a couple of these races, this is a Republican primary tomorrow, and but everybody can vote for many of these candidates, like for sheriff, no matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. Even though it says Republican primary, you can vote, and it's a big deal. Especially the law enforcement side. And we'll be talking with one side of that tonight with Eric Garmon, who is running for state attorney. That is the top prosecutor for 6 counties. So if you get arrested, the top prosecutor decides whether or not it's a good arrest, whether or not you need to stay in prison, and they'll allocate resources accordingly. If you live in Bay County or Gulf County, let me see if I can get them all. Holmes County, Calhoun County, Washington County, and Jackson County. If you live in any of those 6 counties, this is an election that you can vote on. And I think it's the most important election that I can remember, quite frankly. If you want a top prosecutor with integrity, we're going to be talking with Eric Garmon, U.S. Marine police officer, attorney, tonight. He's running against incumbent Larry Basford. And boy, during the campaign, during the debates, Eric Garmon has pulled no punches, Jack. I mean, it's been unbelievable. And I'm going to ask him to elaborate on those. But before I do, let's thank some sponsors and get right to this interview. So if you want people to know more about this candidate, share, tag people, let them know that he's on with us right now. All right. Let's thank us a couple of sponsors.
Have you received a speeding ticket for which you want no points placed onto your driving record? I'm El Saline, 850-215-0628. Let me help you.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome. Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777.
All right, let's get right to it. Again, tomorrow's the big election, Super Tuesday. You're going to be voting for sheriff. You're going to be voting for state attorney. Nobody knows what a state attorney is. It's the top prosecutor. County commission. Ron Keel is running, and he is asking for your vote. Tommy Ham's been there too long, quite frankly. All right, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about Eric Garmon. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I talked to you quite a bit, and I know why you're running and who you are. And let's do a little bit of that first, and then I want to show a hot clip of you debating your rival, the incumbent state attorney, top prosecutor, Larry Basford. Boy, they were hot debates, and I want to dig into a little bit. But when you got out of high school, you went right at it. A U.S. Marine. Talk about it.
I did. I got out of high school, and the towers had just been hit. It was just a really crazy time in our country, and I did just simply what a lot of people did. Is I saw a need and a call, and I answered that, and I decided to join the United States Marine Corps, and it's been one of the better choices of my life because the things that you learn in the Marine Corps. They stick with you forever, and it's not something that I would trade for anything. Just the pleasure to be able to serve my country has always just been the absolute highlight of my life, and the differing ways that I've done it.
And then after that, after you served as a U.S. Marine, and I learned the lesson: never call somebody a former Marine or an ex-Marine. I won't do it. I won't make that mistake. Not with you. You were a police officer. So then you're a police officer, and I know you. And the reason I'm excited that you ran is because I know how much you revere the Constitution, and it's not just lip service. I mean, you actually understand it. You study it. Talk about your time as a police officer.
Sure. So when I joined the Marine Corps, it's like a lot of people when you're 18 years old and you decide to enter the military service, you say, well, clearly, naturally, I'm going to do 40 years, and then retire. So there's no reason to make any other plans. But that's not, the plan that God had, and that's not the way that things worked out. So I'm 100% disabled. So when I came home and my injuries had healed, I wasn't done serving, and quite frankly, I said, well, geez, it would be a lot easier to do a lot of things, and I considered those, but the call kept pulling me. And somebody said, you should be a police officer. And I was like, well, I guess you're not wrong. And the more I looked into it, it was a great opportunity to serve right here at home. And that there is a great need for military service. There's also a great need for people right here at home, to protect and make our community safer. So I did that. I was an active police officer for 6 years, and then I served another 10 years as reserve. I have 16 years of ongoing service. And I've had my police standards for 18 years now. I actually still have active police standards. I could walk into any police department right now today, and they'd give me a badge and a gun and tell me to go hit the streets. So that's something that I still maintain. But it was very eye opening, being boots on the ground, and if normal in normal people, or I would say in your normal course of life, very rarely do you call the police. So, you know, understanding that each time that you showed up to somebody's house, it very well might be Tuesday for you, but it's probably one of the more stressful situations they've been in. And that really has carried over to, being an attorney, because
Mhm.
yet again, whether you're in the civil system, the criminal system, or otherwise, for us, it can be just another day, but it's very important to remember that it's one of the most, terrifying, scary, important, however you want to put it, days of somebody's lives, especially in the criminal justice system when their liberties and freedoms can be taken away, sometimes permanently.
Absolutely. And Eric, I know that your rival, your opponent, the incumbent, Larry Bassford, who has been a prosecutor, um, I guess his whole career, he says that's the experience we need. All right. And you keep saying, there's more experience. As a matter of fact, he implies that you've never even stood in front of a judge or a jury and made an argument, but you've done that quite a bit. You've actually done it on the other side. And I think as a defense attorney, as a civil attorney as well, you know what makes a good case. And I think that gives you some insight. And I also know that you believe, or one reason that you said you're running is because right now too many people are being arrested for minor offenses and spending months in jail, and all of those resources should be used for real serious crimes to make sure that real criminals stay in jail. Will you talk about that?
Sure. And look, at the end of the day, if there are a lot of minor offenses, and there's a lot of arrests for minor offenses, but what we start looking at is the allocation of resources. And if it's something like a first time, minor trespass, camping on the beach, things like that, we shouldn't see people sitting in jail for 60 days, and sometimes more. When I was a public defender, we had a gentleman there that had been in jail for 62 days on a trespass. Now, the statutory limit is 60 days. But, they were kind of like, well, I wish I could do something. We ended up having to go before the judge, and the judge, of course, dismissed it. But it's just that kind of inefficiency. Not only why were we there, but why in the world were we anything even close to that amount on such a minor charge, when at the time we were still shipping people to Walton County, spending $2 million a year. So it's not at all about just getting people out of jail, but what we really look at is what is good for the community. And at the end of the day, if you're not in jail, you're not making truck payments, you're not making car payments, you're not making alimony payments, child support payments, you're not being a productive member of society. So if there's a way that we can get you back out into either a supervisory, probation, or sometimes just a time served. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you were camping at the beach, and a lot of people might not really even understand exactly how crazy that charge can be. But at the end of the day, let's get somebody back to work, because if they come back out and they've been in jail for even 30 days, more than likely their car might be repoed. They might be in the middle of an eviction. So, I mean, we're setting people up to possibly be offending at a larger level.
I want to say something about the camping on the beach thing. All right. It's not what it sounds like sometimes. I remember going in front of the Panama City Beach City Council back, I think it was 2018 or so. And they passed an ordinance. The city of Panama City Beach passed an ordinance. And that ordinance defines camping on the beach as simply being anywhere in a certain location between the hours of like midnight and 6 a.m. So if you're out there, they call that camping on the beach, and you can be arrested for it. It is insane. I remember telling Mayor Mike Thomas that you can't just redefine things, right? Like I said, this podium is a podium. Even if you call it a donut, Mayor Thomas, it's a podium. And I promise if we take a bite out of it, it's not going to taste like a donut. It's like Alice in Wonderland. Eric, they pass crazy local ordinances, and then they arrest people, and they languish in jail sometimes for simply being in a certain area. And the city has defined that as camping on the beach for sometimes 60 days. That's unbelievable.
Many times these minor charges, again, we're talking about, nothing against somebody's life, liberty, or otherwise. Really, I mean, an enhanced speeding ticket, if you will, for a lot of this. I can tell you, having been an officer, you call me as the prosecutor, I'm not going to look. They took the ride. They've learned their lesson. I'm not sure that 45 days in jail is going to teach them any more of a lesson than the night in jail. So, I've talked to a lot of police officers, and they have a lot of buy-in on this. They're like, yeah, just talk to us and just call us. But on the same manner, when you're not calling them and you're dropping, more serious offenses such as DUI and all that, again, it's all what in the world are we prioritizing here?
You mean when the police officer is not consulting? Is that what you mean when the police officer, if the police officer is not quite sure, what you're saying is call us, call the prosecutors, and we'll let you know if we think it's a good case or not a good case. Use your judgment.
Yeah, or by the same manner, call the cop, and say, hey, what's the deal here? Is there something greater that we need to be looking at? Because many times they'll say, look, we're not looking for them to serve, some elongated sentence. So, just get their input and make them, again, part of the process. Because a lot of times the complaint I get is that a lot of action is taken without police officer input. And look, they put their life on the line. They put a lot of work into this. So maybe it's camping on the beach, and I'm not saying whether it's a good charge or a bad charge, it might have a use, but maybe this person matches the description of somebody that's been burglarizing lots of homes and things like that. Then, well, yeah, if all we can get them off the street for is camping on the beach until we can investigate more, wonderful. But let's actually then go and investigate and look and say, was this person up to anything more or not? Because at the end of the day, again, are we making society safer, or are we being more productive with what we're doing? And, sometimes we're just not. Sometimes we are. But we need to look at the overall impact that it has for having these people, languish the full time in jail for these minor offenses.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the demeanor or the disposition of a prosecutor. We saw that the incumbent, Larry Bassford, has quite a temper when he's asked questions by the Beacon of Bay County, Jody Moore. Follow the Beacon of Bay County on Facebook. And she asked a question at a debate. And boy, the incumbent stood over her and pointed his finger and was visibly angry. The law should not be angry. And that concerns me. Also, the top prosecutor should not have conflicts of interest. And at a debate, I'm going to show you really pointed out a conflict of interest when the question was asked by WJHG. Great question too, by the way, WJHG. They asked the question, what about, and I think they were asking about Police Chief Ricky Ramey, what about if a police officer has done something wrong, broken the law? What do you do? And this was the answer that was given at the college. Let's take a listen to this, Eric.
If a police officer is engaged in misconduct, either on or off duty, how does the state attorney's office their conduct?
Well, obviously that depends on who the officer is. Okay, and the reason I say that is
No.
The reason I say that is because we have had deputies and we've had patrol officers that got in trouble with DUIs and other forms of misbehavior, on duty and off duty, and we've prosecuted those. However, if it is the head of a department, for instance, if it would be a sheriff or a chief of police, that's a whole different matter altogether, because we have special relationships with those individuals, okay? We have to have a good working relationship with them and with their departments. I know what this question is referring to, perhaps from what happened up there in Lynn Haven. In that case, because of our working relationship with that chief, and because we had a murder case pending and we knew how important our working relationship was with that office, we decided to get an executive assignment and have the governor assign a special prosecutor to handle that case. So there would be no indications that there was any special favors or anything done with that officer. If it's an off-duty situation where there's just some official misconduct by an officer, sometimes that affects their credibility, and we have to look and see if whether or not we can use that witness in the future in any cases where he or she may be called to testify. Each case is different, and we have to base our decisions based on the facts and circumstances of each case. In the case where we saw a executive assignment recently, that is what the people would expect me to do when we're prosecuting someone like that, that is the head of a department or a sheriff, for instance.
If you're expected to go after errant law enforcement officers, you first have to have your own house in order. In that Lynn Haven case, the conflict said, well, I'm best friends or I'm really close friends. It was 3 weeks later. It does not take 3 weeks to know that you are so close with somebody that you need to conflict off. If you're so close with that person, you also should be protected from that person's son. And your office dropped that person's son had an illegal baiting case in Washington County 10 days later, and you dropped it without conflicting. Now, if you're too close to him here, why are you not too close to him there? If your son and your daughter-in-law are law enforcement officers and making cases and presenting them to a jury, maybe you should conflict. Maybe your prosecutor does not believe they can drop that case if they need to, if their dad is their boss, is the one that is actually going to make the decision. So before you can start with law enforcement, you have to start with your own house. You have to conflict when it's good. If your political opponent who says they want to run for state attorney gets pulled over, and the lieutenant from the sheriff's office says on the cell phone, now this is in a deposition, should I arrest him? And your answer is yes, you should conflict off that case. You should not prosecute that case. You must first get your own house in order.
Wow. Wow. All right. Eric, you want to elaborate a little bit on some of that?
Sure. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you know, there's a lot more you could go into, but in the issue of conflicting, first let's talk about his son and daughter-in-law. They're officers with the Fish and Wildlife Commission. Now, what he would tell you, and he's mentioned this in other debates, is, hey, just because my kids are law enforcement officers does not mean that my prosecutors would have any thought that if they dropped a case, there might be retribution, or I might at least not be happy about that. If you look, the public affairs officer for the state attorney's office had a family member that got arrested, and Mr. Bassford certified conflict. He said, a person who works for me, their child is involved in this system, and because of that relationship, I need to conflict this off. So if a conflict exists when another employee's child is involved, how in the world can a conflict not exist when your child is involved? I mean, it's your child, so that it just doesn't make any sense. But yet, again, at the end of the day, is it really inconvenient to possibly conflict off of hundreds of cases? Well, maybe, but again, it's all about what's just and what's right, not what's easy, not what's convenient all the time. You know, I hate it, but maybe he shouldn't be stationed here if there's going to be an issue. Is there a conflict in every case? I'm not saying that, but there's definitely the appearance of one. And then as far as the the case with Mr. Crawford is who I was talking about with the political opponent there. Their conflicts are so much deeper than that. I mean, at the end of the day, you have somebody who is an announced political opponent. You have somebody who is, every judge in the 14th Judicial Circuit conflicted off because they said, we've known this guy a long time. We've worked around him. I'm sure that, the state attorney's office has worked with him just as much. I can see where there might be less of a conflict for the state attorney's office there. But yet again, they all conflicted just to be safe. But announced political opponent in the WMB debate, he said, well, yeah, but I didn't know that he was my political opponent till after he was arrested. Well, great. But then a year and a half later, we're still prosecuting the case. So,
That's incredible.
Even if that is in fact the case. Also, what is one of the primary sets of witnesses? One of the primary sets of witnesses are employees of the Children's Advocacy Center and also employees of the Sheriff's Office, Lieutenant Mathis specifically.
Board
so
members.
Mr. Bassford at the time and still currently sits on the board of the Children's Advocacy Center with Lieutenant Mathis, with a lot of the people. So again, it's not just, is there a conflict? Is there the appearance of one? And any one of these factors could have possibly rose to conflict, but there were multiple factors. So yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's just, again, it's not what's necessarily doing what's easy, it's what's doing right.
I'm going to show Eric, I'm going to show the WMBB question. Tom Lewis, actually, I'm always getting on the news director, Tom Lewis's rear end about something or other, Huey Lewis in the news. But boy, I'll tell you what, he began to ask really good questions, real questions to both of you. And that's the best I've ever seen Tom Lewis. If Tom Lewis had worked like that every night, I'd be a fan of Tom Lewis. But let's take a look at this. And you brought up, I want to point this out too, Eric. This was July 24. Even though Attorney Hoot Crawford, the Marcy's Law attorney who was arrested by his political rival, state attorney Larry Bassford, and you're going to call him on it, he's going to admit it. This is before the sentencing hearing, a week before the sentencing. Commenting with specifics on an open case. Isn't that against the rules?
Well, you're never supposed to disclose information about an open case. And in fact, Mr. Bassford said that during the WMBB debate, either shortly before that or after that. Sorry, I can't comment on an open case, but then proceeds to comment for a few minutes on an open case. So yet again, it's precarious at best.
All right, I want to take a look at this. Let me try to get the screen right so it's not so we don't have writing over what I'm going to show you. Here we go. Let's take a look. This is amazing. This was July 24th, a week before the sentencing of Attorney Hoot Crawford. Again, Eric Garmon is going to call out incumbent Larry Bassford for a conflict, and this is how it goes.
Mr. Garmon, in some of the past debates, you've made a pretty big issue of either recusing oneself for a conflict of interest or maybe recusing oneself too quickly. Is that correct? Am I down the right path there with this?
If you have a conflict, there's no such thing as too quickly. But what you want to make sure is, for instance, if it's a name, is it the same exact individual? So, I mean, you want to see the name and instantly do it. But if it's somebody that you know for sure who it is, and you know the relationship you have with them or their child or, whatever the conflict may be, we need to conflict off that as soon as possible, because even the appearance of impropriety can cause a serious conflict. So we want to do that as expeditiously as we can.
I know of a number of times you have exercised that option, Mr. Bassford. Can you think of one where you might have, or Mr. Garmon is pointing towards that maybe you should have recused yourself or asked for a special prosecutor, or are there any of those circumstances out there?
Not that I'm familiar with. I mean, if we believe that there's a conflict either because of my position or a relative of the state attorney, then certainly state attorney employees, then we look at that and we make a decision whether or not we should continue to handle the case or it should be conflicted out. And we always err on the side of caution to avoid the appearance of impropriety.
Oh, really?
Mr.
Let's
Bassford,
ask Eric.
Mr. Garmon's made an issue out of your son working. I guess, correct me if I'm mistaken. I think he works with Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And he's made an issue of that about your attorneys maybe not being comfortable handling cases that he's involved in. Is that an issue?
It's not an issue at our office, okay? Tom, as I indicated before, we have about 18,000 cases every year that comes into our office. That's 12,000 cases circuit-wide misdemeanor cases, and then another 6,000 felony cases. In Bay County, I believe those numbers run somewhere about 8,000 misdemeanor cases and then 4,100 felony cases. When my son or my daughter-in-law makes a case, I don't even know about those cases most of the time. And they are reviewed by the prosecutor that is assigned to those cases. And that prosecutor reports to their supervisor. We have a misdemeanor supervisor, Bob Pale. Many times I don't even know what cases they have made and how those cases are resolved.
Mr. Garmon, are you aware of any issue in that regard?
Absolutely.
Tell me.
Absolutely. The fact that my opponent doesn't believe it to be an issue is the issue. Conflicts of interest are not just direct, actual, and right out in your face. They're also any potential conflicts of interest. So again, let's take the prosecutor out of it. If you're the person being prosecuted and you see Bassford and there's another Bassford, the fact that you probably don't think you're getting a fair shake. And again, I would say that if we're speaking in actual reality, especially a brand new younger prosecutor at the misdemeanor level, I doubt highly that they truly have freedom and they really believe that they can conflict when they need to. And the fact that they then have to go to a misdemeanor prosecutor to ask if they can conflict is an issue. They know ethics. They know what they believe to be conflict and not. It's not something you should have to run up the flagpole. If you believe that you have a conflict or that there is one, you should be able to certify it. But as far as no direct examples of conflict, in the Hoot Crawford case, okay, when the Bay County Sheriff's Office had Mr. Crawford pulled over, deposition, or for those who don't know what that is, an interview under oath, the lieutenant from the Sheriff's Office called the state attorney's office. And in that deposition, they said that they spoke to Mr. Bassford, who said, yes, go ahead and make that arrest. Now, all of the judges in the circuit conflicted because of the long-standing nature of Mr. Crawford in the circuit. I would say that Mr. Bassford has that same relationship, but if what the court documents say are true, then there's an even larger issue that
I just want to point out that when Eric here is talking about Hoot Crawford, he is a local attorney. He's a Marcy's Law attorney, and he was arrested for representing a client. And a week after this debate, he was scheduled to be sentenced. And you're going to see Eric Garmon's rival, incumbent Larry Bassford, talk openly during a candidate debate about an open case, which is way off limits. Watch this.
He gave the command to arrest, or at least the okay. There's no way that does not rise to the level of a conflict.
If I could respond to that, Tom. First of all, yes, we do supervise our misdemeanor attorneys, and there again goes the lack of experience in this. When someone comes to work at the state attorney's office, they are giving a tremendous amount of discretion, but they are supervised by an attorney who has 30 years of experience, and because his job is to lead and mentor those people to make sure they're using that discretion wisely. In regard to the Hoot Crawford case, who was he really representing? Was he representing the victim, the child victim in the case, or was he really representing the person who was accused of committing the crime against the victim?
Let's talk about that, Eric, because that is an unbelievable statement that he just made. He is insinuating that Hoot Crawford was not really representing the 16-year-old girl, who is now 18, by the way, and who went in front of the judge a couple weeks ago and said that she is devastated that her attorney was arrested. I mean, he just basically questioned whether or not Hoot Crawford was really representing his client. And that's one of the reasons they chose to arrest Hoot Crawford. Is that not insane, Eric?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all about professional composure, whether or not it's insane or not. As you'll see,
Leave that to me.
As you'll see through some of the other comments that we'll see tonight, I'm sure, when he kind of gets off script or on his heels, he'll start speaking really kind of from the heart. And when he does that, it's look, we're all human. But just as when you're a police officer, I would not be able to, on any form of public communication, repeat the things I've been called and threats I've received and all those. And you know what? You understand that, again, somebody else is going through a crisis, or even if they're not, you're the professional and you stay within the rules. And that doesn't mean that, nobody will ever slip up. But when you are the leader, when you are the face of an agency, then you need to be, safer than sorry. So I'm not going to get into a deep conversation on it, other than, if there's an open case, sentencing hasn't occurred, we're still not sure where we're going. I don't think you should, be commenting on a case that, well, and again, he would agree with me because he says it,
exactly
somewhere else in here, but you shouldn't be commenting on open cases, where I will leave it at that.
All
but
right.
It's also more just about composure and professional composure. Professional composure.
Yeah. And so that's one thing he said about a case that he should not be commenting on because the sentencing hearing had not taken place yet. He's going to say a few other things. First of all, he said, who Crawford really representing, insinuating he was not really representing the girl. Unbelievable. Here's the next part.
In this case, law enforcement and the Department of Children and Family Services, whenever they receive a report that a child has been abused, they have an absolute duty to investigate that case. And that's what they did in this case. During their investigation, they made a determination that this child victim needed to be taken into protective custody to prevent further exposure to the person who had abused her and to prevent any harm. Now, law enforcement and the Department of Children and Family Services.
All right, we're going to pause right there because that's what happened at the actual trial was unbelievable. The accusation was that the 16-year-old girl's older brother had molested her. Turned out that wasn't true. How do I know? Because the lead supervisor from the sheriff's office that really pushed all this, Lieutenant Jeremy Mathis, was under oath on the witness stand in the trial, and he was asked by the defense attorney, were you afraid that the brother was going to harm the girl? And to my great surprise, Lieutenant Mathis said no. So the brother was never a threat. It was a pretext. And I'm surprised, Eric, about how little the state attorney, Larry Bassford, knows about the case. But anyway, I'm not going to even, unless you want to, I'm going to play the other clips, but I get the sense that you're walking a professional line here. It is what it is. Let me play another thing that he said.
Services use extreme caution when investigating these cases, because if they don't, there could be more harm or more abuse to a victim. In this case, the attorney interfered with the investigation of this child abuse case. He was arrested. He was tried by a jury and convicted for interfering with the taken into custody, as well as tampering a witness.
So he was actually, what he was actually arrested and convicted for was interfering with the lawful custody of a child. The state never had lawful custody and he wasn't able to make the case. Number two, interfering with a victim. They never named a victim. It's a specific intent crime. They have to name a victim. They never did. The assumption is that it is Hoot Crawford's own client. Any thoughts on any of that? Was he arrested for representing his client at an advocacy meeting?
Well, again, I'm not going to get into the facts of the case because, the men and women of that office looked at that and decided to prosecute or not. What I would say is it shouldn't have been something that we were presenting, that our circuit was presenting to a jury. I believe there should have been my biggest comment is that we shouldn't have been trying the case here. It should have been either the second or the first or whoever got assigned.
Good point. All right. Well, let me get out of this here. And you had mentioned that you would really like to answer some questions. So let me let you talk about the election tomorrow, why you're running, and I'll take a look at some questions and throw them up on the screen if you'd like to answer some.
Sure. Again, so I've been involved in the criminal justice system here in this area for the better part of 20 years, 19 years next month. And what I can say is that a lot of things have changed, some things have not. But at the end of the day, whether it was as a police officer or as an attorney, I've been a trial attorney for 7.5 years now, either in the civil or the criminal context. I just got tired of seeing things that, were either being ignored or not addressed. And a lot of these things are things that can, easy is a very dangerous word to use, but with little change, be changed, right? You just have to want to. So at the end of the day, it's instead of having 7 or 8 investigators serving subpoenas and doing other things, have them investigate. Now, I mean, they do some investigation, but what I will tell you is that I believe that the investigative wing of the state attorney's office, for instance, is extremely underutilized. We can hire a process server just like anybody else for $30 or $40 and utilize that sworn badge gun carrying investigator to augment. Because I can tell you, having worked at agencies all the way from 10 people to hundreds of people, agencies have different capabilities, and some of them need a lot more help than others. But really, even the most competent staffed, even the sheriff's office, which is the largest in our area, they're still not attorneys, right? And if you have a homicide or a serious crime, they need to know that they can pick up the phone and they can get either an investigator, an attorney, or both on scene, right away. So that way, we're not having evidence go to the wayside or we're not doing things improperly, that we are making sure that this case is prepared and worked up correctly from day one, from second zero. Sometimes you don't need that, but at least having that there. And what I can tell you is in years of old, that was a lot more prevalent and that was a lot more available. It's just something that has kind of went to the wayside. It's not just me talking. The good news is I'm also talking from experience of, dozens and hundreds of police officers that have come to me and, other people involved in the system. It's not just police officers, victims advocates. I've talked to a lot of people. We hear a lot about teamwork. Well, don't talk about teamwork. Let's make a team. It's great on a political ad, but it's also, great. We have a 14th Judicial Circuit DUI task force, for instance. Why in the world do we not have active members from the state attorney's office involved in that? We have a 14th Judicial Circuit human trafficking task force. Why in the world do we not have an active component from the state attorney's office in that? There's really no reason to it. So, it's just things like that. It's just seeing a problem, knowing that, you have a fresh idea or a new way to do that. But more importantly, just simply having the want, the gumption, and the courage to treat everybody equally, right? It doesn't matter if you're, a truck driver living in Glenwood, or if you're, a doctor living in North Shore, or, a farmer living in Jackson County. Everybody should be treated the exact same. And, we should be making cases off of factual reasonings and facts. And right now, one of the problems, without getting totally into a tangent with no direction, but
will you hold that thought, because you just mentioned the idea of law enforcement treating everybody equally. And this would be a good time for me to remind people that you're not the only one running for office in the law enforcement category, as a prosecutor, but there's also somebody running against the incumbent for sheriff. And this would be a good time to hit this paid political ad. I hope that you vote for Andy Hussar, who retired from the sheriff's office last year as a captain.
You lead by example. You are beyond reproach with your character, with your work ethic, and how you deal with situations. Deputies are going to make mistakes, but the community needs to know that they feel comfortable enough where they can come forward with a concern, listen to them, figure out the problem. If there is a problem, you correct it and you fix it.
Vote Andy Hussar for sheriff on or before August 20th. All right, Eric, you were going to go on to another thought, and then remind me if I forget. After this train of thought of yours, we've got some questions for you.
Sure. So one of the most basic duties that you have as a state attorney, or that your assigned assistant state attorneys have, is to look at the facts, right? See what comes through the door and not just glance at the facts, okay? Because a lot of times, what a lot of times gets looked at is the what we call the probable cause narrative, okay? Or if the arrest complaint, it's what gets you sent to jail. And that's typically going to be very short. It's going to be, 5 or 6 sentences if you're lucky, and it's probably going to say, "See my report for further." And there's going to be a full report, and the report might not be too much more illuminating. But what do we have so many times now is body camera. And a lot of times, this body camera stands completely opposite in the face of what is being said on the arrest report. And this is not always nefarious. Look, law enforcement, they're having to make split-second decisions in very unsafe conditions and, middle of the night, middle of the day, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, sometimes the body camera will just show something different, right? And again, it sometimes, there might be an honest mistake or otherwise. I mean, we have cases where it's not an honest mistake. Thankfully, that's not extremely prevalent. But what we will see is, this body cam not being watched, and the previous administration as well as the current administration say, "Listen, there's this landslide avalanche of body cam. It's just overwhelming us." Well, the public defender's office, which was far less, well, I won't say far less, but definitely less funded and less staffed, they look at the majority of all body cam that walks through the door. Okay, we've got a veritable army of staff and investigators, otherwise, that even if they don't have the time, well, let's make the time. Let's figure out a process where we can get somebody reviewing this, because it's not just about saying, "Oh, gee, well, this person shouldn't be in jail." It's also about seeing, well, maybe there are crimes that either for lack of experience or otherwise weren't added, that if they're not added in a timely manner, can't be added. There are a lot of things, hey, we're looking at this video. There's this white truck. Let's find that white truck. I mean, there are so many avenues that we can assist as the state attorney's office. So it's not just about saying, "Well, gee, it said that, he had a pill bottle, but he didn't have a pill bottle." It's also, helping law enforcement and making sure that if somebody needs to be facing charges, that they do that. But what I can tell you right now is, by and large, that video is not with any regularity reviewed, at least at the beginning. So when a prosecutor raises their hand, and they don't always do that, but it sounds better for TV, I guess, but they're swearing an oath when they file official charges. It's called an information. Without getting into the weeds, a lot of people think there's grand juries all the time, this and that. No, in the state of Florida, it's one prosecutor or the assistant prosecutor saying there's either a crime or there's not. They're also swearing that they've reviewed all available evidence and that they believe, after reviewing that evidence, that a crime has occurred. So without properly looking at all that evidence, it's really hard for us to, in good faith, do that. Now, this is not at all a criticism of the prosecutors. They're doing the absolute very best they can. I mean, they've got 400 or 500 cases. I mean, they're buried. That's why we need to get them help. That's why we need to get people looking at the videos, because look, somebody who's either been in law enforcement a long time or somebody trained, it doesn't take very much to spot glaring things on video. But also in concert with a specially assigned intake prosecutor to review these. We're still going to miss some. You have thousands of videos. You're not going to see everything every time, but you never see anything you don't look for. You never see anything you look at.
J.K. Rowling, the author, said, "There's nothing like looking if you want to find something." Right? If you want to find something, there's nothing like just looking. I think you've really sort of touched on this answer, but here's a question for you. How will you restructure the state attorney's office, top prosecutor's office in 6 counties, to make it more efficient than it is now?
Well, that's a large question. But what I can give you are some of the highlights, right? I mean, as far as a 100-person agency with 30 attorneys, that's a long conversation. And what you first have to look at is what are we doing now? How is that working? Some of the things that I think can be changed day one. One is to get an intake prosecutor. That intake prosecutor is, by the way, that's not an entry-level job. That's one of your most or more experienced prosecutors that has, 15, 20 years, 10 years of experience that can really, on a very quick basis, say, does this even meet the elements? Is it, do we need to do something different? Do we need to follow up with law enforcement, or do we need to let law enforcement know, hey, there's just not a crime here? For instance, you pulled somebody over in Alabama, and we're in Florida, so we just don't have jurisdiction there. So there's really nothing we can do to fix that. And sometimes it's a little simpler than that. You'll have people who may accidentally get pulled over because, where is Lynn Haven? Where is Panama City? Where's the beach? Where's the county? So sometimes you'll have, again, very minor things where they just might be out of their jurisdiction and have no jurisdiction. So again, that's an example. But some of the things we can do are, first and foremost, restructuring of the investigators. So right now, there are 24 agencies within the 14 judicial circuit, law enforcement agencies. We don't always necessarily know who to call, right? That's what I hear when I'm talking to police officers, and you'll hear, well, of course you can call me. Well, yes, I mean, of course, I'm sure anybody who's the state attorney will say, if you're law enforcement, you can call me. But with 24 agencies and thousands of people, that's just not practical. So it's really good to know, who in the world do I call? I need this help with training. I need this help with equipment. I need this, whatever it is. We have a complaint. So each of the investigators will be assigned, depending on the size of the agency, 1, 2, 3 agencies, and they will be the absolute point of contact. That doesn't mean you can't call somebody else, but they will be your go-to person. What we're also going to do is we're going to make sure that that investigator is keeping up with that agency on a weekly basis. Has anybody been fired? Has anybody had substantiated, internal affairs complaints? Because what we end up doing right now, without forward looking, I brought up in one of the debates. Listen, a gentleman at Panama City Beach Police Department, almost a year ago, last September, was fired for lying. And he didn't only lie. When he was asked about the lie, he doubled down. He said, I missed a court date because my kid was in the hospital. When he was confronted about that, he continued to lie. He was finally let go. Well, if you're going to lie about that, and you're going to lie about that to your boss, there's your credibility kind of goes to the wayside. The problem is they didn't follow up like they should with their agencies, and they didn't write a letter warning people, hey, this guy, we might be prosecuting cases, and who knows what he may or may not be lying about, until July, almost a year later. And when I brought that up, my opponent said, well, yeah, but they should have called me. They should have told me that was a breakdown in communication. No, if you are the leader, if you're saying, hey, I'm a leader, well, great, be one. You lead from the front. The buck stops with you. And again, can the state attorney call every agency every week, every day? No, but it's all about effective management and saying, listen, you keep up with this person, you keep up with this person. It's a two-way street. Because the problem is if we've now prosecuted cases, and now there's a legitimate challenge to those cases because there's issues with credibility, and we bring things back, and somebody gets possibly released out of prison. That's happened, by the way. About a year and a half ago, 10 people released from prison because the state attorney's office just, quite frankly, didn't follow up correctly. So it's things like that. So restructuring the investigations, making sure we have on-call investigators again. When we get proper staff levels, on-call state attorneys. Like I said, I've been an on-call investigator. If it's good enough for an investigator, it's good enough for state attorney. I mean, if we truly believe that we're a team, and I do, I like being, I'm sure any of those investigators would rather be in home in bed with their family, but it's about putting bad people away and keeping them there. So we need to make sure they have the support.
Absolutely.
Just 8 to 5. They have the support they need. And I would just say, starting there, starting with just being open and transparent, and, getting a good hard look at things from the beginning, which is a robust intake department. One thing I heard is, well, there's an intake because when they go to the jail, they fill out a booking sheet. That's insane. That's not properly intaking a case. So those what I would say would be my first two changes. But it's I think like any manager, you're not going to decide all the changes you're going to make before you get into an actual organization. You need to get in and see what's working and what's not working, because it's really not just about me. I mean, if something's working, even if it's not my idea, who am I to change it? But we're also not going to do things just for the sake that, well, we've always done this, so why not?
And Eric, how important when I was I remember being a new officer in the U.S. Air Force, and my dad was a master sergeant, so I knew that a new officer better go to the people who have been there longer and have done that more and are really running the show, and that's usually people like the master sergeants and so on. How important is it going to be for you to have those kind of people, and how are you going to find the experienced, good prosecutors with integrity to be your top brass?
Well, look, it's not just prosecutors. What I would say is, I'm sure that the staff at the state attorney's office, given different direction, are going to do just fine. One thing I've heard rumors of, and I think it's pretty common, but is that, if the other guy gets in here, our jobs are in trouble. I'm looking to make one staff change, and that's Mr. Bassford. Okay. Everybody else, look, if you don't do your job, it's going to be like anybody else that just started, or, just because you've been there for 25 years, as long as you're doing your job. And what I would tell you is, I believe that the vast majority of people at that office you have nothing to worry about. But it's not a retirement home. It's not a place for somebody to just come clock hours, but we have a job to do. And what I can tell you is, the encouraging thing is that office has some fantastic prosecutors, and not just prosecutors, victims advocates, legal assistants, all the way down to the bottom, that are already doing a great job. They just need some different processes and a different vision. You brought up being an officer and a master sergeant. I tell people this, it's natural, I think, for people to be afraid of change. But one of the reasons that that we have such a fantastic military is, you don't have the same first sergeant or commanding officer for 20 years or 8 years. You have constant change of ideas, constant change of people, and it makes you grow. It makes you better. So,
and for people who haven't been in the service, what you mean is, after usually 3 years or so, the military will send you across the country or to another state. You go to another base. So in a 20-year career, you might have been at eight bases or forts or whatever branch you're in. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and when that happens, no one says, "Oh gosh, we don't know what to do." No, I mean, you say, "Look, there's
a continuity change
leader here. We have a job to do," and I expect nothing more than the men and women of the state attorney's office to do that. But look, there's always going to be people that may want to take other opportunities or whatnot, and that's fine. What I can tell you is, I have a very large number of experienced prosecutors who've said, "Listen, it's not that we don't want to be prosecutors. It's just that we don't like being micromanaged, and we want to, have freedom to do what we need to do." So the good news is some of these extra positions. Now, I'm not talking about, I'm looking to replace this job and that job. Well, there's no intake prosecutor right now. Well, the good news is, I have a lot of people who are willing to fill that job. And right now we've got openings. You can look online. We've got openings. So the good news is I can bring a lot of experience back to that office, and I plan to.
Right on. I want to remind everybody the election is tomorrow, on Tuesday. When we get back from this very quick message, Eric, I'd love for you to just let everybody know why you would like their vote, and we'll wrap it up for tonight. But also tomorrow, Commissioner Tommy Ham, the incumbent, wants a third term. And many of us don't think he should get a third term. Instead, you've got options. All right, Eric, it's you and me and everybody else. Remember, 6 counties are in the 14th Judicial Circuit, and the top prosecutor over those 6 counties. So if you get arrested by a police officer or a sheriff or sheriff's deputy in any of those 6 counties, this is the position that will decide whether or not to prosecute, whether or not the charges are valid, whatever it is. And if you live in Bay County, Gulf County, Calhoun County, Jackson County, Washington County, or who did I miss out? Did I say Jackson, Calhoun, Washington, Gulf, Bay? I think that's it. If you live in any of those counties, you'll be voting tomorrow for Eric Garmon or for incumbent Larry Bassford. And Eric Garmon is here asking for you to vote for him.
Well, listen, this whole process has been one of just the absolute, just craziest, but yes, rewarding times of my life. The fact that I've been able to go around the 6 counties and talk to so many people has really just been amazing. I mean, I can't tell you enough. If you want to make a change, please run for office. Please. We need new ideas. We need that. We need that. But I humbly ask for your vote tomorrow. My opponent has been at that office a long time. And if you like what's going on, then I'm sure more of the same will happen as it has for the last 40 years. But if you're ready for something new, if you're ready to be treated the same, if you're ready for justice to be equal across the board, then I, again, ask for you to cast your vote for Eric Garmon for state attorney before the close of polls tomorrow.
All right, Eric, I appreciate it very much. Thanks for staying up late. I know you got young children and a lovely wife to get back to. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right. All right. Thank you. Oh, let me get this off the screen. I'm doing it all. This is like driving, trying to stay on the road and shift gears. Shift gears. You remember doing that? Hey, I also want to thank, of course, those of you who help support my efforts, like the Unknown Patriot. Thank you again for your support so I can bring this information to you, and all of those who throw a tip in the tip jar and our patrons at patreon.com/Bernie Thompson, where it is easy to donate as little as $5 a month, and crowdfunding is so important. And it is easy, anonymous, and you can quit at any time. All right, elections tomorrow. Get out and vote, bring friends. And I appreciate you spending your time with me. And I will be back soon with more information for you.